Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode at Master the NEC, where we talk about the National Electrical Code, all sponsored by Electrical Code Academy Incorporated. Today's episode is a continuation in our 2020 National Electrical Code preview, where we are looking at some of the changes that are likely to take place in the next 2020 cycle. However, this is an example of one that probably shouldn't, but I'm going to leave that for you to decide, and maybe I'll give a little commentary on that, or maybe I will encourage somebody to put in a NIT-MAM, but we're just kind of see how it goes. So what we're talking about is the requirement for GFCI protection. Obviously, we're looking at 210.8a. H is dealing with dwelling applications or dwelling units, and the number 5 is dealing with a specific location. In this case, it used to be unfinished basements and areas that are very similar. So let's look at what the actual 2017 code says, and this is the one we're dealing with. We're dealing in the requirements of 210.8, so I just want to show you that. When you're dealing with dwelling units, all 125 volt single phase 15 and 28 receptacles installed in these locations, and you got, here we've got 10 locations where we're dealing with. In the 2020 code, we'll have 11. But here we're dealing with the 10 locations that are in here. Now, we're most notably dealing with number 5 in today's topic. If you have an unfinished portion or area of a basement not intended as habitable room, again, it might be just where you have a workbench or whatever you've got, storage area, whatever, then it would require to have protection, GFCI protection for those receptacles that are in those areas. Now, the only change that we have to this, and that makes sense, by the way, because usually we have finished areas that are no different than it would be your living room or your bedroom or whatever. It's got gypsum board up. It's got ceiling typically on it. So whatever your jurisdiction classifies as something being finished, then we're done and it's adequate. The change that's taking place for the 2020, and I'm not so sure I agree with this, but I just want to show you what's taking place, is the following. Now, here's what it's going to say in the 2020. You notice that we have 11 now. And here is where it used to say, again, if you will, let's kind of go back so you can see it. It said here, unfinished portions of areas of a basement not intended as habitable room. Well, in the 2020, along the process of public input, public comment stage, ultimately, we ended up with finished and unfinished areas of basements. Well, when it made it down to the final, the second revision, it got blasted down to just basements. Now, that means that this change would require all receptacles that fall under the 125 volt through 250 volt, that are 150 volts or less to ground, will have to be protected by GFCI protection for personnel. Now, the issue here is if it's a finished basement, before it never required that. And it was only for unfinished basements or areas. And that made sense to me. We have unfinished, open, some of the wiring methods are open, exposed, whatever could take place. But now in the 2020 code, it's going to apply to all basements, whether it's a finished off basement, whether it's totally finished off, and if you were blindfolded, you were put in there, you wouldn't know whether it was on the third floor or it's in the basement. You just wouldn't know. It's requiring it very broad now. Now, some people argue that's fine because basements can flood. I get it. So the argument was presented, and it didn't get a unanimous. There's a code panel that was dealing with this, code panel 2. That it wasn't unanimous. I think there was 3 individuals that had good, plausible reasons not to vote positive for this or approval for this. And I'm hoping those individuals, and again, being my personal bias, will step up and do a NIT-MAM and try to correct this. Because the way it's written here, they really were pushing for the finished and unfinished areas, and the basements is just correcting the language and saying, well, if you're wanting finished and unfinished, just might as well say basements. If that was your intent, I believe personally that it was better to be unfinished areas of basements in that type of application. Anyway, neither here nor there. Just want to kind of give you what's coming down the pike. If this goes through to the NIT-MAM and makes it through, then all basements, whether they're finished or unfinished, are going to have GFCI protection on all those receptacles that are 125 through 250 volt and that are 150 volts or less to ground. Okay, be GFCI protected. Okay. So that's the real significant change. We did have some, again, exceptions. So the exceptions down here apply to 1 through 3 and 5 through 8. Obviously, it doesn't apply to 9 and it doesn't apply to 11. Only 1 through 3, 5 through 8, and number 10. All right, so moving on to other than dwelling units. We just had some tidying up of making sure you understand it's 150 volts or less. So even a 120, 240 volt application, for example, is still one leg of a 240 is going to be 150 volts or less. So kind of just keep that in mind. The only significant change down here, exception to number 2, this is dealing with sinks. It says right here that receptacles located in patient bed locations of Category 2, which is general care, and Category 1, critical care, that's in healthcare facilities. Okay, they have to comply with 517.21. And so 517.21 is basically telling you that you're not required to have a receptacle, in the bathrooms or toilet rooms in these locations, Category 2 or Category 1. However, if you do have the receptacle in there, then it's got to be GFCI protected, is the statement of that. Now, if you have a patient bed location and you have receptacles and you also have the sink or toilet that's actually in that patient bed location, not in a separate room, but in that location, then you're not required to have GFCI on those receptacles that happen to be in close proximity to that sink or toilet based on that close proximity to that patient care location. So that's what 570.21 is dealing with. So you can go look at that and learn a little more about that. Indoor locations is simply added not only wet, but also in damp locations. Made perfect sense to me in that application. So other than that, that's the real significant changes here. So, and the other thing, I guess let's look here and see if I can find here. Now, nothing really significant that I want to draw out here as far as the changes. Again, you'll see this probably change. It looks like to me that the boat hoist was probably removed from here. And if you look at here, we'll look at the SR on this. You'll see that it looks like this section was deleted because GFCI protection for boat hoists was actually added in 555.9. So that's the reason that was deleted here. Okay, so it makes sense. Okay, so other than that, there are some other changes in here, but really we wanted to focus on this change dealing with the dwelling unit and other than dwelling units application. So hopefully you got something out of that. Again, as always, if you have any questions on some of these changes, please feel free to email us at info@masterthenec.com, where we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. If you need some extensive training on the National Electrical Code, visit our website. You'll see there's a bunch of options for courses that we offer. If you have any questions about those, reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to explain them. You can even talk to students that have taken the courses before and you'll see what they get out of it. So again, thanks for listening. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.